What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you some highlights from the Gamescom Opening Night Live showcase. That kicks off, of course, Gamescom, an event that will last several days over in Germany, highlighting all sorts of games. The opening day, of course, being kind of the main showcase, so I thought it would be fun to go over some of those announcements, talk about what I enjoyed the most, and kind of just generally what I thought of them. Though here at the beginning, it is worth a mention that most of the stuff here was not new reveals, but rather new gameplay or expanding upon things the community was already expecting, so there wasn't really a lot of world premiere type stuff. With that out of the way, let's actually dive into these a little bit. First up, Starfield made an appearance, showing off a little bit of new gameplay here, though with that release date very nearby, wasn't really too much new to show, but it is public information that the review embargo for that lifts on August 31st, at which point many people will get a very in-depth look at it right ahead of its early access period launch on, I believe, September 1st, with the game launching on September 6th. Next up, there was a little bit of information on Alan Wake 2 from Remedy Entertainment, the people behind Control and, of course, the original Alan Wake. This was mostly just new gameplay, kind of showing off the themes and everything that they were going for here, but if you're familiar with Control at all, you'll kind of get the gist. A lot of it is rooted in the paranormal, though I would say the main thing of note here is that this game actually saw a slight delay, I believe by like 10 days, pushing it back to October 27th, but certainly a game I've got my eye on either way. Third on the list, we have a little bit of news around Diablo 4, specifically that the second season will kick off on October 17th, and it is the Season of Blood, a vampire-focused season that will see us gaining vampire-like powers, alongside a few other new features. I will say, though, it seems a little early to announce that season, as we are only like a month into the first one, though with the recent, I would say, rough patches for that game that have seen a lot of nerfs and balancing updates that weren't wildly popular, might have something to do with it. On a more personal note, as somebody who loves Diablo, the fact that Diablo 4 is online only really eats into my personal enjoyment of the title. Ultimately, though, time will tell how successful these season updates wind up being. Moving right along, though, we then have more gameplay from Black Myth Wukong, an adaptation of the novel Journey to the West. But what's interesting about this title is that I believe this is the first time we're really getting a lot of new gameplay from it since about 2020, I believe. And while Black Myth Wukong in 2020 made quite the splash with its visuals and effects, I'm curious how this is going to land with people these days, because since 2020 we've actually had a lot of somewhat similar games to this release, and I'm wondering if that's going to kill people's enjoyment a little bit. For instance, we recently got Wo Long, which a lot of people in the comments of my review for actually got it confused with Black Myth. But that doesn't change the fact that this game still looks very striking, if nothing else. But unfortunately, we still don't have a release date for this one or anything, so still waiting for more word there. But then we got more Armored Core 6 gameplay. This one is releasing quite soon, August 25th, literally just a couple days from now. And it's a game that focuses on rather over-the-top mech battles from Software. I might very well check this game out for myself just to kind of see what it's all about, but I am completely unfamiliar with the Armored Core franchise outside of the fact that it's mech battles, obviously. And while the footage I've seen of this game does look very impressive to me, I'm much more curious simply about how this game winds up doing commercially, because it seems like a relatively, I would almost say, niche title, coming from a very well-known and well-respected developer. So I'm curious if that is going to be enough to push Armored Core 6 into acceptable sales territory for them. Either way, though, I'll probably buy it myself just to check it out, but I don't really plan on reviewing that one. But then we got a Lords of the Fallen story trailer. Lords of the Fallen is coming out on October 13th, and it is going to be a rather gritty Souls-like, of course. But what's interesting about Lords of the Fallen is that it is technically a remake of a not terribly old game. I believe back in like 2017, the original Lords of the Fallen released. So the fact that they are putting out a story trailer for this one was a little humorous for me, but ultimately it's advertising, so not exactly shocking. Either way though, it definitely looks very cool, and the original was considered a very janky title, so I'm curious to see if they manage to pull off this remake in a way that is actually satisfying for people, and this is a game I'll be reviewing, so with any luck they'll have improved more than just the visuals. Third to last, we have Warhammer Age of Sigmar Realms of Ruin, a game that is slated for release this November 17th to be specific, and it describes itself as an action RTS, that is to say real-time strategy game, that is naturally set in the Warhammer universe, more specifically Warhammer Age of Sigmar obviously, but this one ultimately has my attention because A, I've just been getting into Warhammer more and more lately, but I also haven't played a good RTS in quite some time, so I think jumping into this one will be interesting at the very least. Though how good it winds up being could certainly go either way, but like pretty much everything on this list, we don't have too much longer to wait on it. Now, I intentionally saved some of the best stuff for last, starting with Crimson Desert. Of everything that was shown at this showcase, Crimson Desert probably has my attention the most. Unfortunately, it still doesn't have a release date, but this game is being developed by the same people who made Black Desert Online, which is an MMO. However, Crimson Desert appears to be a single-player open-world action adventure, and the trailer was truly impressive. Just visually, it was very striking, as I'm sure you can see. But in addition to that, the gameplay and mechanics at play certainly seem to take inspiration from a variety of titles. And while it's hard to say just from a trailer, it certainly looks like it has a ton of promise. If they can couple it with a compelling narrative, I think this one could potentially be very cool. No real dates or anything associated with this one, so hard to say when exactly we would ever see it, but it definitely looks pretty cool. And then last but not least, I would say the biggest thing the showcase had going on, outside of probably Starfield, was Cyberpunk 2077's upcoming DLC, set to launch on September 26th. However, that DLC is going to be bringing with it a huge overhaul to the base game that this particular gameplay reveal went into a bit of depth on. We're going to be getting a new area, new weapons, new systems. They're overhauling how cyberware works, how the perk system works. They're adding vehicle combat, mounted combat, like things being mounted onto your vehicle that you can use in combat, that kind of thing, alongside overhauling the enemy and police AI, and it looks to be a truly massive update. Though, I will say, I'm curious how much of this is going to be a free base game update and how much of this is going to be specifically the DLC, because in instances like this where a DLC brings a large patch that changes the base game, some of that is usually for free, more or less, and then the DLC is usually like the new content specifically. And we don't have really any details on specifically what you'll be paying for when it comes to this DLC, which is a curious point for me. But in any event, all of these changes are certainly welcome. I plan on re-reviewing the game for this DLC because its changes are so wide-sweeping. And while I certainly don't think it will make up for the game's terrible launch, these changes nonetheless do look really cool. That, though, is pretty much going to do it for this video, though I will say here towards the end there were a variety of other announcements at Gamescom, most of them much smaller in nature. Things like DLC or updates being announced, or just smaller indie games in general. So while this certainly wasn't everything, it was the stuff that I found the most interesting, so I hope you enjoyed it. With that said though, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, let me know if there was anything else from the show you particularly enjoyed or what you thought of these titles here. All of that out of the way, truly, just thank you so much for watching, I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.